Hello, this is Dr. Cunningham. I'm wishing everyone a happy holidays, and I certainly hope that you all enjoy all of the holidays that you celebrate, whether it is Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and also the New Year. During this particular time, it's a time of joy, but then it can also be a time where people are dealing with their own mental illnesses. And so it's a space and time of the year during Christmas and New Year's where I do not meet with clients except for those who really do need the help. Because again, the ones that are, in a space of joy, they're doing okay. At the same time, for those who need support or help, they're able to get the help that they need during this particular time of year. And then I also like to be able to share more information for free of charge because as a clinician, I focus on my clients. At the same time, I'd like to, in a sense, broaden my clientele with regards to providing support around mental health, and more specifically, working with families and individuals who are dealing with grief or traumatic grief. Now, a consideration of the criteria are specific to the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. Actually, number 5, text revision, now includes a diagnosis that's specific to complex grief or prolonged grief, which is what it's called. And it's actually under the stress or trauma related diagnoses. And the reason why that's important to keep in mind, because again, grief itself is very normal. It's not included in the DSM because grief in and of itself is a part of the process. So again, if we're looking at the 5 stages of grief, which actually were made aware to us through Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Now, there was someone else prior to her that actually did study bereavement, and he is considered the father of focusing on bereavement. At the same time, the 5 stages of grief were made very popular, specifically through Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, which is a female. As a feminist, I just want to make sure that I highlight the fact that there are men and women who are equally important with regards to establishing grief and the process of grief, and that leads to healing. So there is the denial, then there is anger, then there is bargaining, there can be depression, and then acceptance. So let's keep that in mind, because if someone is dealing with prolonged amounts or dealing with depression, it could be very well a part of grief. And grief doesn't necessarily mean, if someone's dealing with the depression, that doesn't necessarily mean that they meet criteria for depression itself, because DSM not only has particular criteria regarding depression, which has to do with like self-confidence, that has to do with whether they are engaging in the activities that they used to enjoy, but it also has to do with the time frame in which they experience those things. So if someone experiences depression or what seems like depressive symptoms for the course of a week, that's not long enough for them to actually meet criteria for having a single episode of major depressive disorder. Okay, so I want to make it very clear that if someone is speaking about depression, they need to have those particular symptoms for a period of time, and they must persist for a period of time. Okay, now there's some information that people can always readily Google. At the same time, it's very different when you're looking at it from the perspective of a clinician who is trained to work with and diagnose individuals. And let's keep this in mind as well, which is the reason why I always tell people, we don't label people as crazy, because where is it in the DSM? But then also we have to keep in mind too, the reason why DSM-5 took so long before it was actually published is because there were studies that showed that 65% or more of the diagnoses that people were giving in the United States were actually inaccurate. And these were trained professionals who are inaccurately diagnosing people based on criteria that they weren't meeting because of the fact that they were popular diagnoses. So I'm very careful about diagnosing and a stickler about diagnosing. So if you're going to give someone a particular diagnosis, make sure that they not only meet the criteria, but look at the time frame, and then allow the professionals to be able to determine what their diagnosis is. Now, as a marriage and family therapist, I look at individuals from a systemic standpoint. So I'm looking at their biopsychosocial and spiritual needs. What's going on, with their medical situation? What's going on with their relational life? What's going on with them psychologically and emotionally? And how are they doing spiritually if they have a belief system or have certain foundational beliefs and values in their life? Because all of that can actually lead to situational things. Because of being a marriage and family therapist, there are more times that I've worked with individuals that have had symptoms that appeared like sadness or appeared like depression or it appeared like anxiety, but it actually wasn't medically related at all. The majority of the time it had to do with situations they were dealing with or circumstances that had to do with the relationships. So maybe because they were dealing with arguments on a consistent basis with their partner, or dealing with arguments on a consistent basis with siblings, or they were having stressful interactions with individuals they were working with at work. So let's keep all those things in mind. I don't want to focus or harp on the negative or the diagnoses because, again, my philosophy is to look at a person from a holistic standpoint. Therefore, that means that I see the entirety of a person with regards to their well-being. And also, I like to focus on who they are as a person. So I'm not looking at a person as a label. So even if a person might meet criteria for a particular diagnosis, they are first a person, because every person is dealing with something and requires support in order to be able to continue to enhance themselves. So we're all a work in progress. I certainly wish you all well, and I certainly hope that y'all have a happy new year.